So a quick introduction to some probability, mostly vocabulary. Um, so some key vocabulary words that you'll need to know. First one being sample, right? The part of the population that you are studying. And then specifically a random sample is not based on any predetermined characteristics of the population. So if you're trying to get good data, you want to make sure that you get a variety of responses or include a variety of people in your study or survey to make sure that all of the groups that need to be represented are represented, which leads to bias. There's a design flaw in your survey or experiment that favors certain outcomes, right? So if I ask the question, how awesome is your teacher? I am trying to implant the idea that your teacher is awesome into your head. So that creates a bias. Another way I could create bias is if I'm trying to figure out what is the most popular professional football team in the country, I can't just go to one city and ask that question, especially if that city has its own professional football team. If I go to Indianapolis and ask that question, I'm going to get an overwhelming response of the Indianapolis Colts being the favorite football team. And if I just stop there, then my survey is going to contain bias. So I would want to include multiple cities that have football teams and cities that do not have their own football teams to get a good population sample and to try to eliminate bias from my survey. Right, so unbiased survey questions are based on strong random samples and unbiased survey techniques. So my questions and my sampling have to be unbiased. The last two here are observational study and experiment. In observational study, individuals are observed, but no attempt is made to influence the results. So with an observational study, you are looking at a group and just watching. Experiment is something that is intentionally done to people, animals, or objects, and the result is observed. So you are doing something to manipulate your group. You are providing them with a medication or assigning them a task that you are trying to test out. So observational study, you just watch, and experiment, there is action or manipulation involved. So looking at some examples, and some of these seem kind of silly, but we're going to talk about them real quick. Example one, deciding whether this survey would produce a true random sample. So surveying every 10th person walking out of a pet store to find out if the town's residents support the building of a dog park. Well, if we think about this, if we only are at a pet store, right? People at a pet store typically have pets, and a good portion of those pets are probably dogs. So you're going to run into a higher number than normal of dog owners who would probably support the building of a dog park, right? So this contains bias. Contains bias because of who we are asking, right? The location of our question asking. So it is a biased survey. So to eliminate that bias, to improve things, we might want to do a better random sample. And to get a better random sample, we might go to the grocery store and ask every 10th customer. We might go to Walmart and ask every 10th customer. We might do a survey of town citizens, call random citizens in town, hold a meeting at a town council meeting, something like that, just to make sure that all the residents are represented and not just pet owners like you would get at the pet store. So calling residents, anything where we can get a good representation of what all the town people truly think. if your town's looking to rebuild a park, LaGrange rebuilt, they added part to the town park, the splash pad and new playground. If they were trying to see if the residents supported that, right, they would need to ask a variety of residents, not just people who are already at the old park. If, hey, should we rebuild this park? People at the park are going to say yes, when other people might not support that idea. So if an example 2, write a survey question to provide the most unbiased answers to this situation. If if the senior class president wants to survey students about the location of a possible senior trip, so something that they might do is obviously ask the students where they'd like to go on a possible senior trip. Before you ask that, you might want to ask if they are interested in a senior trip, so that you are only polling the people who would truly be interested in going, and then ask those people about locations. And something that you may want to do ahead of time is find out what's affordable and within a possible budget. Right? If your options are going to Pokagon for the day, or going to a South Bend Cubs game for the day, it's foolish to ask, hey, where do you want to go? And people say things like Florida or Chicago, when those things aren't even an option, right? So you may want to do some multiple choice based on what's a possible location of a senior class trip. So there is example 2. And then example 3, we are determining how we can best gather data, or what these situations represent, be it survey, observational study, or experiment. So in part A, comparing the grades of 200 students, half of whom are involved in sports. So this would be an observational survey. I am just looking at the data. I am not trying to manipulate the data in any way. So this would just be an observational study. I pull report cards and I look at those, and I sort them into 2 groups, student athletes, non-student athletes. For example B, comparing the heart rates of 200 students, half of whom are randomly picked to run a mile, half of whom are going to walk the mile. So this would be an experiment, right? I'm going to assign different tasks to the groups of people, and then see if that activity, the running of the mile or the walking a mile, how that impacts heart rate. So that would be an experiment. And then part C, you want to discover the opinions on school lunches by asking a random sample of freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors. If you're asking, for the most part, that is going to be a survey. And notice that they asked all grade levels their opinion. That would give you a good random sample, and try to remove bias based on age. So that is some vocabulary to get us started with our data and probability unit.